Peace and love to everybody listening. Sometimes life teaches us lessons we never asked to learn. One of the hardest is this. The same love that once felt like home can start to feel like a foreign place. Love don't always end with explosions. Sometimes it fades with silence. One day you're building dreams together. The next you're looking at someone you love and realizing you speak two different languages now. But distance doesn't always mean failure. Sometimes it's the universe pushing us toward evolution. Today, I want to talk about that transition when love turns into distance and how to grow through it instead of breaking under it. I'm gonna break this down into 6 key truths, so if you're going through this, you leave with clarity, strength, and direction. Love hits different when two souls are aligned on vision, values, and direction. In the beginning, everything feels effortless. You're vibing off the same dreams, speaking life into each other, believing that whatever you build together is going to last forever. You see a future, they see the same thing, and that alignment creates a bond that feels unbreakable. But life has a way of testing everything we claim to believe in. It'll put pressure on your plans, on your mindset, and on your heart. And one of the biggest tests any relationship will ever face is what happens when one person starts growing faster than the other. See, love is beautiful when growth is mutual, when both people are elevating, evolving, and committed to becoming the best version of themselves. But real life doesn't always unfold like a movie script. Sometimes you start leveling up mentally, emotionally, spiritually, or financially, and the person you love stays exactly where they've always been. Or maybe it's you who gets comfortable, stuck in routine, while the other person is waking up hungry to evolve. Either way, uneven growth creates a shift. It starts subtle, almost invisible at first. Differences that felt cute or harmless in the beginning start to create friction. What used to be, that's just who they are, now becomes, why don't they want more for themselves or for us? Imagine two people who fell in love as teenagers. Back then, love was enough. Dreams were simple. Be happy, stay loyal, build a family someday, maybe make some money and come up together. But then life starts exposing one of them to new information, new circles, new opportunities, new ambitions. Maybe they picked up a book that changed their mindset. Maybe they lost someone and it woke them up. Maybe they hit rock bottom and realized they're meant for more. They start working on themselves, healing, learning, taking risks, investing in their goals, expanding their vision. Meanwhile, the other person is holding on to the nostalgia of who they were at 17, trying to freeze time because they're comfortable with how things used to be. Now love turns into something else. The person who's growing starts trying to inspire their partner, put them on a game, encourage them to elevate. At first it's gentle. Let's try something new. Let's dream bigger. Let's step out of our comfort zone. But comfort is a powerful drug, and people who fear change see growth as a threat, not as love. Instead of appreciating their partner's evolution, they start resisting, criticizing, or even mocking it. You think you better now? Why you always reading those books? Why you changing? But the real question is, why stay the same when life is calling you to evolve? The tension doesn't come from the love fading. The tension comes from the distance that forms when one person is fighting for evolution and the other is fighting to stay the same. You don't stop caring about that person. You just stop recognizing the connection that once felt natural. Conversations change. You start talking about purpose, discipline, mindset, leveling up. They want to gossip, complain, relive the past, repeat the same patterns. You think in generational wealth, healing trauma, breaking cycles, they just want things to go back to how it used to be. That's when love stops feeling aligned and starts feeling heavy. And this isn't just romantic love. This is friendships, family, business partners, any relationship built on the belief that you were going to grow together. Growth is never the enemy, but uneven growth can create an emotional gap that love alone can't bridge. Because love is a feeling, but growth is a choice, and not everyone chooses it. One of the hardest things to accept is that someone you love may not be ready for the future you're stepping into. You might try to pull them with you. You might shrink yourself to stay relatable. You might tone down your dreams just to keep peace. But every time you do that, a part of you dies. You lose momentum. You lose identity. You lose purpose, and eventually you start resenting yourself for dimming your own light in the name of love. There are people walking around angry at life, drained, unfulfilled, not because they lack potential, but because they chose loyalty to comfort over loyalty to growth. They chose to hold on to someone who wasn't willing to evolve. But loyalty should never mean sacrificing your becoming. Real love should elevate both people, not confine them. Growth exposes what the foundation of your relationship was built on. Sometimes you learn that what you had wasn't partnership, it was proximity. You loved each other because you were in the same space, the same mindset, the same stage of life. But once evolution enters the chat, you realize the connection wasn't rooted deep enough to survive transformation. And that truth hurts, but it's necessary. When growth becomes uneven, distance forms, not because either person is wrong, but because their journeys now require different paths. And that's the part people don't talk about enough. It doesn't mean the other person is bad, lazy, or unworthy. It simply means their timeline, their lessons, their evolution is different from yours. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step back and let both souls grow separately. If you're the one evolving, you're not wrong for wanting more. You're not wrong for outgrowing conversations, environments, or relationships that keep you small. And if you're the one who feels left behind, you're not wrong either. It just means life is inviting you to rise too. But both must choose it. One person can evolve for the both of you. There comes a moment when you have to look at love with honesty, not nostalgia. Ask yourself, is this relationship helping us become who we're meant to be? Or are we holding on to something that only made sense at a lower level of ourselves? Growth doesn't destroy real love. If it's real, it adapts, it expands, it evolves with you. It celebrates your elevation, not fear it. But if love turns into distance, it's often because life is making space for both people to expand in the ways they need to without limiting each other. And maybe one day paths align again, or maybe they don't. Either way, the evolution was necessary, because the worst thing isn't losing someone you love. The worst thing is losing yourself while trying to keep them distance. Rarely begins with a breakup, an argument, or some dramatic moment. Most relationships don't die loudly. They don't explode, they erode. It's like water dripping on stone, slow, subtle, almost invisible at first. And by the time you look up, the damage is already deep. It's rarely one big betrayal that pulls two people apart. Most of the time, it's a collection of small wounds that never got treated. Tiny moments that hurt, but no one spoke on them. Feelings swallowed because the conversation felt uncomfortable. Pain pushed to the side because it's not worth arguing about. So you stay silent. You let it slide. You tell yourself it's not that deep, but every unspoken truth becomes a brick in the wall that eventually stands between two hearts that once felt inseparable. You don't realize how dangerous silence can be until you're living in it. Silent resentment is poison. It doesn't kill quickly, it kills slowly. It seeps into the foundation of the relationship until even the good moments start to feel heavy. There's a certain type of loneliness that hits different when it happens next to someone you love. You could be sitting on the same couch, sharing the same bed, posting the same smiles on social media, but emotionally, you're miles apart. That's the kind of distance that starts inside before it ever shows up outside. One thing that studies, therapists, and real-life experience agree on is that communication isn't optional. It's oxygen. A Harvard study reveals something powerful. Relationships with consistent communication, not perfect communication, not Instagram quote communication, just honest, real communication, are over 5 times more likely to last long term. That means the couples winning out here aren't the ones who never disagree. They're the ones who refuse to go silent. They talk even when it's uncomfortable. They express even when it feels vulnerable. They choose truth over temporary peace. But most people weren't raised around healthy communication. A lot of us grew up watching silence take the place of resolution. We saw parents walk around the house not speaking for days, weeks, even months. We watched problems get brushed under the rug instead of talked through. We were told, don't talk back, don't question, keep your feelings to yourself, don't make it a big deal. So when we get into relationships, we repeat what we saw. We shut down. We avoid conflict. We think staying quiet keeps the relationship calm, not realizing silence is building a storm. Picture this. You express something vulnerable and your partner dismisses it. Maybe you say you felt ignored and they say you're overreacting. Maybe you bring up a concern and they respond with sarcasm or defensiveness. It hurts. It makes you feel unseen. The next time you feel something, you remember that moment and you decide not to say anything. Why bother, you think? So you stay quiet. But silence isn't neutral. Silence teaches the other person that your needs don't need attention. Silence teaches them that you're okay without support. Over time, they stop asking. They stop checking in. Not because they don't care, but because your silence told them you were fine. That's how emotional distance is born. On the other side, they might feel unappreciated. They might be trying in their own way. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not the way you want it, but in the only way they know how. And when their effort goes unnoticed or unacknowledged, they start withdrawing too. Slowly they pull back. They stop doing the little things they used to do. They stop initiating conversations, affection, plans. Not because they don't love you, but because they feel like nothing they do is enough. Now you have two hearts still in love, but both feeling alone. You feel unheard, so you stop sharing. They feel unappreciated, so they stop trying. The crazy thing is, both of you are hurting for the same reason. You just don't know how to say it anymore. The silence becomes a habit. You start avoiding deep conversations because you don't want it to turn into a fight. You start sitting on your emotions because you're scared of the reaction. You start pretending everything is cool because the truth feels too heavy to unpack. But the truth doesn't disappear, it just sits in the space between you, building distance inch by inch. Here's the part people don't realize. Avoiding a conversation doesn't avoid the consequence. You either speak your truth or your silence will speak for you in ways you can't control. It'll show up in your tone, in your patience, in your willingness to connect. It'll show up in passive-aggressive comments, cold energy, lack of intimacy, lack of effort. The body always reveals what the mouth refuses to say. And by the time the distance is visible, the root of the issue is buried under months or years of silence. Some couples try to fix distance by spending more time together, going on vacations, having date nights, posting pictures, buying gifts, having sex. But you can't build intimacy on top of unspoken pain. What was never said will still be waiting when the moment ends. You can't heal something you won't acknowledge. The real courage isn't staying, it's speaking. It's saying, this hurt me, I need this. I don't feel seen, I don't feel safe opening up. I want us to try differently. That level of honesty is uncomfortable, but it's the only way to truly stay connected. Communication isn't about winning an argument. It's not about being right. It's about being understood. It's about making sure your partner knows your inner world and you know theirs. People think communication means talking a lot. It doesn't. It means talking honestly, from the heart, without the mask, without the ego. Some of the most powerful conversations are the ones that make you both cry, both reflect, both grow. If you've been holding something in, ask yourself why. Is it fear of conflict, fear of losing the person, fear of being judged, fear of being vulnerable? Whatever the reason, silence will cost you more than honesty ever will, because silence doesn't protect the relationship, it suffocates it. Unspoken pain creates imaginary stories. If you don't tell your partner what's going on, your mind will assume the worst about them and theirs about you. Distance creates doubt. Doubt creates insecurity. Insecurity creates disconnect. And before you know it, you both feel unloved, unsupported, unchosen. When the truth is, neither of you ever stopped caring, you just stopped communicating. Speaking your truth isn't about confrontation. It's about connection. It's saying, I care enough about us to not let this sit between us. It's understanding that honesty isn't what breaks relationships. Silence is. Because if you don't speak your truth, distance will speak for you. Love can feel like the most powerful force in the world when it's pure, balanced, and rooted in mutual respect. But when love becomes one-sided, when one person is constantly giving while the other is constantly receiving, it starts to transform into something else entirely. It starts feeling like partnership and starts feeling like sacrifice. And sacrifice, when it goes unreciprocated, begins to feel like slow self-destruction. A lot of people lose themselves in the name of love without even realizing it's happening. They think they're being loyal, being strong, being committed. They think love means holding everything together no matter how heavy it gets. But love was never meant to cost you your identity. There's a difference between supporting someone and abandoning yourself to keep them comfortable. But many of us confuse the two because we were raised on the idea that love means doing whatever it takes to keep the relationship alive. We think love is proved by how much we can endure. Somewhere along the way, sacrifice became romanticized, like the more we hurt, the more real it must be. But that's a broken definition of love. Real love shouldn't drain you, silence you, or make you shrink so someone else can shine. Real love doesn't ask you to trade your peace, your purpose, or your self-worth just to keep another person close. The truth is, distance doesn't always start when two people stop caring. Sometimes it starts the moment one person stops caring about themselves. When you begin to disconnect from your own needs, your own dreams, your own boundaries in the name of love, you create a silent separation within yourself first. You start betraying your own spirit, your own truth. And the moment you abandon yourself for the relationship slowly loses the real you. It becomes built on a version of you that isn't whole anymore. Eventually, that creates a distance so deep that even love struggles to reach it. A lot of people confuse love with carrying the entire emotional load. They think being the strong one is their role. They think if they don't carry everything, everything will fall apart. They become the fixer, the healer, the forgiver, the one who tries again and again and again. They're the glue. They're the one apologizing just to keep peace, even when they weren't wrong. They're the one explaining, adjusting, bending, compromising until there's nothing left to bend without breaking. And while they're busy holding everything together, the other person gets comfortable leaning, not contributing, not pouring back into them, not growing. But a relationship is not a rescue mission. It's not one person doing the emotional, mental, and sometimes spiritual labor for both. Partnership is supposed to be a balance. Two people pouring into each other, two people showing up, two people taking accountability, two people choosing effort. It doesn't mean everything is always equal, because there will be seasons where one person needs more support than the other. Life happens. But those seasons should rotate, the roles should shift. Some days you carry them, some days they carry you. That's partnership. What it should never become is one person carrying the entire relationship on their back while the other barely lifts a finger. Imagine someone who keeps giving and giving and giving. They're trying to be patient, trying to be understanding, trying to be loving, trying to be everything their partner needs. They swallow their sadness so the other person doesn't feel guilty. They silence their needs so they don't start an argument. They overlook disrespect because they don't want to lose the relationship. They forgive things they never should have had to forgive. They stretch themselves emotionally until they are exhausted, and one day they look in the mirror and don't recognize themselves. The spark they once had, gone. The dreams they once chased, on pause or forgotten. The confidence they used to carry, replaced with doubt and insecurity. And the saddest part is, the person they're sacrificing for doesn't even realize the cost. That's not love. That's self-betrayal. People will take whatever you're willing to give, not always because they're selfish, but because you taught them that your boundaries don't exist. You showed them you don't require balance. You demonstrated that they can do the bare minimum and still get your maximum. You trained them to think you don't need anything in return. And once that dynamic is established, it becomes hard to undo, but it always catches up, because eventually the giver gets tired. Not because they stop loving, but because they finally realize that love shouldn't require them to disappear. The irony is, the people who always give the most are usually the ones afraid to set boundaries. They're scared boundaries will push the person away, scared of being called selfish, scared they won't be loved if they stop over-functioning. But boundaries don't ruin healthy relationships. Lack of boundaries do. Boundaries create structure, clarity, and respect. Without boundaries, love becomes survival. You start operating from fear. Fear of conflict, fear of loss, fear of being alone. And love based on fear is not real love. It's attachment, it's dependency, it's emotional imprisonment. The moment you start abandoning your own identity to keep the relationship intact, you plant the seed of distance. Not distance between you and them at first, distance between you and yourself. And once you are disconnected from yourself, the relationship is no longer anchored. It becomes imbalanced, unstable, and emotionally unsafe. Because when someone who has carried everything finally hits their limit, the collapse is not quiet. It comes with years of suppressed emotion pouring out at once. The partner is shocked, confused. Where is this coming from? But the truth is, it's been there. Buried under every unsaid feeling, every ignored need, every silent sacrifice. The most dangerous thing you can do in a relationship is self-erase. The most loving thing you can do is show up as your full self, with boundaries, with needs, with standards, with identity intact. You teach people how to love you by how you love yourself. If you don't honor your own limits, no one else will. If you don't protect your peace, no one else will know that peace matters. If you keep giving beyond your capacity, people will think you don't have one. Love without boundaries is not loyalty, it's self-abandonment. And when you abandon yourself long enough, your heart starts to distance itself as a survival instinct. At that point, it's not even about the relationship anymore, it's about saving your soul. Real love requires boundaries, not to keep someone out, but to protect what's within. Boundaries don't say, I don't love you. They say, I love me too. When love starts turning into distance, most people panic. They think space automatically means something is falling apart, something is ending, something is being taken away. But distance isn't always destruction. Sometimes it's revelation. Sometimes it's the first honest moment in the whole relationship. Because when two people step back from each other, whether physically, emotionally, or mentally, the truth finally has room to breathe. And truth is something we usually can't see clearly when we're in the middle of the emotion, the routine, the attachment, the comfort, or the story we've been telling ourselves about what the relationship is supposed to be. Distance is a mirror. When you're close up, your vision is blurred. You're too inside the moment to notice the cracks, the patterns, the sacrifices, the mismatched values, or the ways you both changed. But once space enters the equation, things you ignored start becoming visible. You begin to see what was real love, what was fear of being alone, and what was just habit disguised as loyalty. You start to realize some things you were holding on to weren't rooted in truth. They were rooted in attachment, nostalgia, or the fantasy of potential. People say love is blind, but distance gives back sight. Think about how many times someone swore they would never leave a person, only to step away and suddenly see the relationship for what it actually was, not what it felt like in the moment. When you're wrapped up in someone's presence, your emotions speak louder than your logic. You excuse behavior, justify imbalances, rewrite reality just to keep the connection alive, but once the connection loosens, your clarity strengthens. You start replaying conversations and finally hearing what was really being said. You revisit situations and finally understand the lesson instead of just the pain. Distance reveals truth, not to hurt you, but to wake you up. And one of the hardest truths to face is this: sometimes the person you miss isn't really them. Sometimes you miss the version of yourself you were in that relationship. You miss who you felt like when you were with them. Lighter, happier, inspired, confident, needed, chosen, seen. People often say, I miss us. But if you dig deeper, the us they are referring to isn't always the relationship. It's the emotional experience they had within it. Maybe that relationship gave you a sense of belonging you never had before. Maybe it made you feel protected, desired, or understood. Maybe it brought out a side of you that you wish you could get back now that the relationship is gone. Sometimes you don't miss the person, you miss the feeling. You missed the late night conversations that made you feel alive. You missed the inside jokes only the two of you understood. You missed the motivation you had when they believed in you. You missed the softness you allowed yourself to feel. You missed how open your heart was. You missed who you were becoming because they encouraged you. Or maybe you miss who you pretended to be to keep them. Because sometimes we don't just lose love, we lose an identity we built around that love. There are people who didn't even like who they were in the relationship, but after it ended, they missed having someone to validate them, distract them, or give their life meaning. That's when distance shows you the raw truth. Were you in love with the person, or were you in love with the idea of not being alone? Were you connected, or were you just comfortable? Did you build something real, or did you just build routines and call it love? Distance reveals the difference between emotional dependency and emotional connection. When you're still attached to someone emotionally, your mind focuses on the good times, the highs, the first, the beautiful moments. That's natural, but as distance expands, you start remembering the rest too. The times you felt invisible, the times you weren't supported, the times you swallowed your truth, the times you settled, the times you loved them harder than they loved you, and slowly the fantasy loses power and the truth takes its place. People fear distance because they think it means losing love, but in reality, distance often protects you from losing yourself. Space doesn't erase love, it filters it. It removes illusions. It separates connection from attachment. It helps you see whether the bond was based on growth or just familiarity, and that clarity is priceless, even if it hurts at first. Sometimes distance reveals that the love was real, but the timing wasn't. Sometimes it shows that the love was mutual, but the healing wasn't. Sometimes it shows that the love was strong, but the habits were stronger. And sometimes distance reveals that it wasn't love at all. It was just two wounded people trying to use each other as bandages. But here's the part most people overlook. Distance isn't always lost. Sometimes distance is a blessing. Sometimes it's your heart's way of saying we need space to understand what this really was. Sometimes it's life making you step back so you can see the whole picture instead of just the parts you wanted to see. Because truth doesn't show up when you're clinging. It shows up when you release. Some of the greatest growth people experience comes after the separation they never wanted. They rediscover their passions. They reconnect with themselves. They start healing the parts they ignored. They level up mentally, spiritually, emotionally, physically. They start learning what love should feel like, what it should require, what it should never ask for, and how it should align with self-respect. Looking back, they realized the distance wasn't punishment, it was alignment, it was preparation, it was redirection disguised as heartbreak. And yes, distance can bring people back together, but if it does, it brings them back with truth, not fantasy, with awareness, not blind hope, with maturity, not dependency. That's the beauty of distance. It doesn't just reveal truth about the relationship, but truth about you. It teaches you your patterns in love. It teaches you what you ignored. It teaches you what you need more of, what you can't tolerate again, and what your heart truly deserves next time. The truth is, distance doesn't end a love that's rooted in purpose, it evolves it, and it ends the kind of love that was only holding you back. So when love turns into distance, don't only look at what you're losing, pay attention to what you're learning, because the lesson you gain often becomes the key to a healthier, truer love in the future. Distance isn't always a loss, sometimes it's clarity, and that clarity becomes the compass that guides you toward a love that doesn't require losing yourself to keep it. Healing after love turns into distance is one of the most uncomfortable journeys a person can take because it forces you to look inward rather than outward. The easiest thing to do when a relationship breaks, shifts, or falls apart is to point the finger at the other person. It's natural to replay everything they said, everything they did, every moment you felt hurt, unseen, betrayed, or unsupported. Blame feels good in the beginning because it protects the ego. It gives you a temporary sense of control. It allows you to stand on the side of I was right, they were wrong. But healing doesn't live in blame. Healing begins the moment you stop focusing on what they did to you and start asking yourself, what did this experience teach me about me? That question requires honesty most people aren't ready for, because accountability isn't about letting the other person off the hook. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of the story you built around the pain. Accountability is not self-blame, it's self-mastery. It's choosing to learn instead of staying wounded. It's turning pain into wisdom rather than letting it become your personality. Accountability says, I can't control how someone treated me, but I can control how I allowed it, stayed with it, responded to it, and what I'll do differently moving forward. A lot of people stay stuck after a breakup, not because of the heartbreak, but because of the blame cycle. Blame becomes a prison. You keep telling the same story. They did this to me. They never appreciated me. They wasted my time. They broke me. They changed. Every time you retell that story, you relive it. Every time you relive it, you reopen the wound. The more you point outward, the less you grow inward. Blame keeps you emotionally connected to the past in a negative way, and that attachment stops you from stepping into the version of yourself you're meant to become after the lesson. Healing requires you to sit with the uncomfortable truth that you played a role too. Maybe not in the pain they caused, but in the access you gave, in the boundaries you didn't set, in the red flags you ignored, in the needs you never expressed, in the love you accepted even when it didn't honor you. Accountability doesn't mean the other person wasn't wrong. It just means you're choosing to grow from it rather than stay wounded by it. Research from the Gottman Institute, which has studied thousands of couples over decades, reveals something powerful. Relationships with mutual accountability, not perfection, are far more likely to heal, reconciled, or end peacefully with respect. It's not people who never make mistakes that succeed in love. It's people who own their patterns, apologize with sincerity, and actively work to grow. Accountability is a skill. And it's rare because it requires emotional maturity, but is also the foundation of emotional freedom. There's a big difference between saying I'm like this because of what someone did to me and saying I'm working on changing this because I deserve better moving forward. One keeps you stuck, the other moves you toward your evolution. Accountability is the bridge between the two. Even if the relationship is over and there's no coming back, accountability allows both people to heal without bitterness. When two people can look back and say, I see what I did wrong, I see what I accepted, I see where I didn't show up, I see where I ignored myself, the breakup turns into growth rather than trauma. It becomes a turning point instead of a life sentence.